Hello, I'm president of TheAlternative, and we are organizing a talk together with Nim about holding governments and corporations accountable. Can you share my slides, please? Yes, so TheAlternative is a student organization. We are part of ETH, and our main topics are privacy and sustainable digitalization, and also free and open source software. And we are primarily touching upon the first aspect here with this talk. And now I would like to give the microphone to Jaya, who will moderate the rest of the talk. Thank you so much for attending.
One, two, 1, 2. Can you hear me all right? And how do I change the slides? Oh, okay. We're doing a little swapperoo.
Yeah, I got it.
In the meantime, I would just like to say thank you so much to The Alternative for organizing this event, and thank you so much to ETH Zurich for hosting such an important conversation at this specific time. A short introduction to myself. My name is Jaya Clara Brecki. I'm Chief Strategy Officer for a company called NIM, and I'll go into detail a little bit more of what we do at NIM in a minute. My background, thank you. My background is actually in digital geography and political economy. Just so you know a little bit where I'm coming from, kind of a little bit of an interdisciplinary background. So this is the lineup today, pretty fantastic lineup, super important conversation to be had in this day and age. So we actually, when we're preparing for this event, we were talking a little bit about showing this specific video. It's called Collateral Murder, which is a video that was leaked back in 2018 to WikiLeaks, and it is footage that's showing the live killing of people in Baghdad, including 2 journalists from Reuters. And it felt like quite an important moment to reflect back on and to try and kind of understand, you know, where we are today in the context of the outcry and the reactions that came as a result of this leak back in 2018. The other reason why it felt like a kind of good place to start is because this was a video and a series of events that actually directly inspired the founding of NIM, the company that I work for. And I mention that because I think it's quite important to understand that when we're talking about tech ethics, we're not talking about some sort of kind of fluffy add-on. We're talking about strong principles. In this specific case, the principled actions of individuals and organizations like WikiLeaks, Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, who also revealed the NSA mass surveillance program. These were individuals that had strong ethical principles that made them do some actions that actually set in motion real, concrete development afterwards, including the research and the development that led to the founding of NIM. So I hope you don't mind. I'm going to talk a little bit kind of low-level practical about NIM and what we do, partially because I think it's quite important to be very practical today and not just talk about current affairs from a kind of high-level abstract view, but also from a very hands-on view of what can we actually do. So NIM is a decentralized network. This is the team that I work with. It includes Chelsea Manning, who joined back in the day, a bunch of other very prominent researchers. I think the slide is kind of awkwardly cropped. I'm not sure if we can do something about that. But here are some of my wonderful colleagues. And as I said, NIM is a mission-driven company, and we have one very concrete mission, and that is to enable digital privacy for all of humanity. And the reason why that's our mission is because we understand privacy as fundamental in order to actually have a democratic society, a functioning democratic society. Without privacy, it's simply not possible to freely evolve and develop ideas and to organize around those ideas without oppression. So what is it that we built? So as I said, NIM kind of came about as a direct response more concretely to the revelations by Edward Snowden about the mass surveillance by the NSA. Specifically one technical problem which had to do with metadata. So the NSA had, there's this famous quote by General Baker that we kill people based on metadata. It continues to be one of those problems in the design of the internet that hasn't really been fully solved. How do you protect metadata of communications? So this was a problem that we have been working very hard to address, and we were doing that with a combination of mixed net technology and blockchain. So concretely, what we built is a global decentralized infrastructure, a globally decentralized mixnet, and a routing protocol that effectively mixes internet traffic with layers of encryption around each packet. It mixes it with dummy traffic in a way that scrambles the patterns of communication as packets travel across the internet. This network is a general purpose network. It can be integrated into all sorts of things. But what we've done is built a kind of user-facing application on top of the network, which is a VPN. So, when you say kind of private traffic routing to ordinary people, they don't really know what it is, and the kind of easiest comparison is a VPN. So we've built what's probably, one of the world's most powerful VPNs. Sorry, yeah.
Stream cannot see your slides.
Sure. I was going to explain that beautiful graph up there, but I'll give it a moment. Otherwise, it's not the end of the world if it's a little bit cropped. Cool. Yeah, so here you can kind of see a little bit of a comparison of, I think it's still quite cropped, but I can live with it if the audience can live with it.
Sorry.
Hey, there we go. Great. So here you can see the comparison between what we do with the mixnet. As I said, we route the traffic through effectively 5 layers of independent server operators located all over the world. And each of those servers, or 3 layers of those servers, actually mix the traffic, meaning reshuffles the order of the packets and mixes in dummy packets as well, which effectively makes it nearly impossible to trace a packet from the sender to the destination. So here, just a quick kind of like comparison overview of how that looks in comparison to Tor, which a lot of people are also familiar with, and of course, your VPN provider, where you're effectively just routing through one hop, and the VPN provider itself can actually see everything that's going on. So what we're trying to do here is protect metadata of communications across the entire internet, but also de-link sender from receiver, right? So someone that's watching the entire network, so a kind of global passive adversary, can't actually trace a packet from one end to the other. So that's what we've built. This is some of our scientific advisors behind the technology. The VPN app itself is already live, so people are kind of using it already all over the world, and we're kind of scaling the services. And given that we're here, I would love to also just allow you all a chance to kind of try it out for yourselves. I know this feels a bit like a commercial kind of pitch here for a second, but this is a very early stage product. Mixed nets is not something that's been in the hands of ordinary people ever before. And so we're very keen to get feedback, especially technical feedback from people such as yourselves. And if you come up and approach me afterwards, I'm happy to give kind of free trial codes and everything like that, so that you can use the app and get involved. And you're also very welcome to get involved as a node operator yourself and help us run the service. We're always looking for high quality people to help us work with the infrastructure. So that is the kind of introduction to NIM. As I said, the reason why I bring that up is not just to kind of give a sales pitch for some VPN. It's to say that when people have strong ethical principles, it can have a direct effect on what's actually built in the world. I would like to say also, going forward, I'm speaking kind of more in a personal capacity from now on, rather than a kind of representative of NIM. When we're talking about, and I was asked to talk specifically on tech ethics, and the reason why this is kind of like so close to my heart right now is because, what is specific about tech ethics versus just ethics, right? When we're talking about technology, we're talking about increasing the capacity and power behind something, increasing the speed, increasing the automation, increasing the distribution, and the decision of what we're empowering in such ways is absolutely crucial. What relationships, what kinds of actions, and this is what ethics really is about. It's about being able to make clear decisions about what it is we want to automate and what it is we want to speed up. Is that automated drone strikes, or is that distribution of knowledge and sharing of knowledge across the world? These are very, very crucial decisions right now. And I think, having a clear ethical compass, both as an individual and as an organization, is super important for that, to be able to make those distinctions. Also because I think at this day and age, there's more and more situations where we're going to find ourselves where we'll have a superior, a line manager, a CEO, a commander, tell us that those guys are the bad guys, we're the good guys, and so therefore do X, Y, Z. And in those moments, for you to be able to make clear calls on if you're still in alignment with your ethical principles or not, you need to have defined those, beforehand. Ethical, when we're talking about, tech ethics and ethical principles, it's really a kind of set of guidance for, both individuals and organizations. But there's something else that's also specific about tech ethics, which is that technology is kind of peculiar in the sense that there's a kind of lateral transfer, right? Where you might be building a kind of profiling and targeting algorithm that's used for shopping. The next moment that gets laterally transferred over to, profiling and targeting for drone strikes. So there's something important here around the fact that one cannot fully encode ethics. It's not something that can be, fully embedded in the tech itself, but actually needs to be worked out in an ongoing basis at an interdisciplinary level with human rights organizations, with journalists, with social scientists. So it's a kind of collective societal effort that kind of cuts across, both tech and society. So when it comes to, to come back to the collateral murder video, that was, 18 years ago. And I think one of the reasons why it got so much attention back then was because there was 2 Reuters journalists that got killed in those strikes. And that caused a kind of global outrage. And I think it was the first time people were, witnessing this sort of thing, kind of, live or like so explicitly in this sort of a way. So reflecting on the context that we're talking about, when we're talking about tech ethics today, we're talking about a very different context. We've just been through, a year and a half of watching more than 200 journalists being killed in Gaza. Of watching 11 universities being destroyed in Gaza. I think there's 14 universities in West Bank and Gaza alone. There's hardly any left now, and only in the West Bank. And the truth is that, private tech corporations are more involved than ever before in these sorts of dynamics and activities and kind of global political warfare. So just a kind of brief context overview before I hand over to the rest of our speakers that can speak much more in depth on these matters. Earlier this year in February, I think some of you might be aware that Google changed their principles. So now to allow for them to kind of provide services for AI within weaponry and automated weapons. The kind of reasoning that they gave for that was, that the context has shifted and, we need to be able to kind of contribute to the defense of democratic societies, right? But what are the democratic societies we're talking about here, really? What's the kind of characteristic of these democratic societies? Well, it's democratic societies that are also, bringing on Palantir to run their public services, right? Palantir having famously undermined democracy, as we saw in the Cambridge Analytica scandals, with direct interventions into elections, and are now, running healthcare services, as well as, of course, also running mass surveillance programs in the US, including, the building of Immigration OS alongside ICE. And also, famously, Palantir are working closely with the Israeli army. So, Palantir is one of the kind of well-known bad guys, right? Google has had a little bit more kind of soft, approach. But Google and Amazon are also very much involved with the Israeli military in Project Nimbus that I think Vikram is going to speak to a little bit more. So what is it that we're talking about when we're talking about AI services for the Israeli army? We're talking about Lavender and Gospel, two programs that were revealed by Plus927 magazine, which is an independent outlet that is a kind of, it's run by a group of both Palestinian and Israeli independent journalists. And they reported on this very early on in the conflict or in the attacks on Gaza, where they were describing, the Lavender AI system and what it does. So what it does is it kind of uses a lot of data points to surface individuals as potential Hamas operatives. And the thing is, when you kind of use AI, you can kind of like, tweak the weights a little bit, right? And what happened in the use of Lavender is they kind of lowered the threshold for, who counts as a Hamas operative. And in the first week alone, they surfaced, I think, 37,000 people as potential Hamas operatives, and singled out their houses, their homes, meaning where their families were, as the targets, not military targets, but people's homes. So, this is the kind of consequence, and this is what we're talking about when we're talking about Google and Amazon providing cloud services for Israeli AI. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about Palantir's contract with the Israeli army. And so with that kind of brief overview, what I would really love for us to try and kind of like address in the next kind of hour or so is this deep question of, like, as people who work in the tech industry, how can we do that while maintaining our ethical and moral integrity, given the kind of context that we're working in today? And I think we have some people lined up to speak that are incredible examples of doing that. So it's a real pleasure to introduce first Maya Arson Crime-U, who's going to speak to surveillance specifically. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to quickly give the Linux users some time again. I mean, I can't say anything else about myself, so. All right. I think that should be working. So yeah, well, almost.
I'm sorry.
All right, yes, now it's working. Well, welcome to my approximately half-an-hour talk on surveillance and what we can do against it. I'm happy to be back at the ETH. Again, I'm glad my last talk was good enough for TheAlternative to invite me back again. So yeah, I'm still going to quickly introduce myself. I'm Maya Arson Crime-U. I am 25 years old. I use it and she, her pronouns. Yeah, and I have allegedly been a hacktivist since 2019, at least according to the United States indictment from 2021. So yeah, depends on whether you believe the US government or not. I'm not going to comment. Yeah, and in 2023, I did my probably most well-known thing. I leaked a 2019 copy of the no-fly list of the US. So that's already on surveillance. I'm not going to go into that too much today because it's probably my most discussed thing. People have probably already heard about it, and I want to focus a lot more on the less commonly discussed parts of surveillance. And yeah, I'm an investigative journalist and columnist, besides being a hacktivist. So yeah, I write about hacks and I do hacks and, you know. Yeah, so here we have a short agenda of what I want to cover. So that's quite a lot. I will not list it now, but you can keep this in mind while we go through. I will kind of hop from topic to topic quite a bit because I just want to cover a lot of different things. So first I'm going to go to my staple topic, which is stalkerware. Yeah, what is stalkerware? I do quickly have to go over this, even if you have read my work and have been to the last talk. Stalkerware is commercially available spyware that anyone can just buy on the internet, which is mostly used by people to spy on their spouses or spy on their kids. It is usually hidden from the target. It pretends to be a system app or something like that, or it pretends to be Google service, whatever that's supposed to be. And usually this is not very highly sophisticated spyware. It generally requires physical access to just download an APK, or requires that person to know your iCloud password or create a new iCloud account and link it to your device. And most of these cost between just $20 to over $200 per month. That's kind of the range these things usually are in. A lot of them also have free trials that sometimes last pretty long because it's a very competitive, very gray area market. So yeah, the thing with stalkerware, and not just stalkerware, is that we as a society have kind of arrived at a point where we surveil ourselves and we also surveil each other, and are normalizing this kind of behavior more and more. And as I said, that's not just a thing with stalkerware. I mean, we have things everyone uses, such as snap maps on Snapchat, where everyone can just see each other's locations, or we use AirTags to track our own things that are on us at all times, or we use Strava to track where we're cycling. And I mean, all of these things are lots of private data we're just giving away. I mean, for example, Strava has been used by journalists to find out where there's hidden US military bases, because soldiers like to go for a run in the morning where they run around the perimeter of their base. And so on Strava, you can just find hotspots in the middle of nowhere where there's just the shape of a military base drawn out. So yeah, quite convenient. This is just the thing we're used to. We all always kind of surveil ourselves, and that's just normal. And I think that's also the biggest problem with stalkerware, is that this doesn't even feel like that much of an issue to people anymore. Yeah, but however, obviously governments love stalkerware too. I mean, it's spyware. Of course, they love this stuff. So I'm going to show some examples from the June 2024 MSpy leak, where the entire contents of the help desk for MSpy, one of the biggest players in the stalkerware business, was leaked to me and DDoS secrets. So why would governments buy stalkerware? They have access to way more sophisticated spyware, right? The problem with that is that usually you need some sort of license or government approval, or the president needs to sign some paper. Stalkerware is already in a gray area. It's publicly available. You can just buy that without any of those steps. So yeah, that's most likely why that's just kind of speculation on my part, but I see little other reason why they would go for stalkerware. So yeah, here's a cool example. This is an email from 2014 from Yaniv Hassani, who at the time was the CTO of the National Cyber Unit of Israel Police. He requested a white label version of MSpy that they can host on their own servers for police reasons, whether this would be to spy on their own employees to see what they're doing on their work devices during work, or whether this was to spy on criminals or whatever. I don't know. They never got into that. This did not come to fruition. I think the MSpy help desk people on their sales email didn't quite understand what they were asking for and just told them some canned answers and then closed the ticket. So very useful support. If they can't tell people that they cannot cancel a subscription and need to keep paying, they don't know what to do. So yeah, we have another example. This is an email from 2016. This was sent by Luke Schwab. As you can hear from the name, this is a Swiss national who at the time was the COO of an Israeli security/mercenary company that did a lot of work for the defense ministry as well as governments all over the world. I think mostly like diplomatic protection, but they also did like military training. Yeah, he also asked for a white label version of mSpy for them as a security company to host and then sell to governments. They don't mention any governments besides the Israeli government, so I'm also going to assume they were going to sell this to Israel. They were also turned down in this email thread, but mSpy told them they were working on a white label product and added them to a list of potential future white label partners. I don't know if they ever ended up talking on another line, but this security company doesn't exist anymore. Luke Schwab now runs another security company in Geneva that I will not name because I don't want beef with him. So yeah, here's a list of some other government agencies I found interested in there. So yeah, a lot of them also through other private security companies, which so often have like people in military uniforms on their website, so they're probably mercenary groups. Yeah, in none of these cases I found any sale occurring. Most of the times their support was confused by the request and didn't want government money, but just because they didn't know they were being offered lots of money. But what this shows to me is that if even just mSpy alone receives this many requests, many other big players in the stalkerware business probably receive just as many, if not more. I mean, most people trying to buy software like this will reach out to multiple vendors and take the best offer. So yeah, I'm assuming governments are using stalkerware, just not mSpy probably. Another really big player that's similar in size to mSpy is FlexiSpy, and I do know they offer a white label solution. Whether governments are using this, I don't know. Yeah, you can make your own bets. So yeah, how do we fight stalkerware specifically? It's a fun answer. They are constantly getting hacked. And most of them then shut down under this pressure and under bad press. Because it makes it pretty hard to run a profitable business when you have to rebrand every other month because a new journalist is writing about how you got hacked again and all the private data from all your customers has been leaked. And yeah, this is also, these hacks allow us unique insight into the industry. Most of what we know about stalkerware as journalists, as researchers, as just anyone comes from hacks. There's some surveys as well every year trying to find out how many people are using stalkerware. From my own experience, those numbers from those surveys are lower than what I personally have observed from hacks. So even just having hacked only some of these companies and having received hack data from just some of these companies, I already have higher numbers than the surveys show. So yeah, pretty sad. But yeah, the other thing with all this constant negative press is that I'm hoping people realize that using stalkerware, if not for moral reasons, is bad because your data and the data of the person you're spying on is going to get hacked. And if not by people like me for like journalistic reasons and to report on it and to like as cautiously as possible using the data, it will get into bad hands. I mean, obviously governments are also interested in this data. There's lots of interesting text messages in these leaks. Often you can find people dealing drugs and things like that and organizing like gang stuff. I usually don't talk about this because I'm not a snitch, so yeah. But I mean, this data is of interest to many people. Yeah, so now we're jumping way back in time to the thing that first gave me massive amounts of press. We're going to 2021, and we're talking about Verkada. I will go over this just pretty quickly. I don't remember a lot of this. This is way too long ago. But yeah, shortly before my indictment in 2021, this is not part of the indictment, so I can talk about it. I hacked a cloud-based security company together with a hacking group. And we had gained access to over 150,000 cameras, primarily in the United States. Those cameras were inside Tesla factories and dealerships, inside the Cloudflare headquarters. They denied that we would have been able to hack Matthew Prince's laptop. I still think we could have hacked Matthew Prince's laptop, but choke. And also inside jails, health clinics, and hospitals. This took us like no time. They just had a Jenkins server publicly exposed on the web that had super user credits just laying around. So we had full access to their whole like actual web front end. We didn't do any cool, like I did this in a browser in 15 minutes. So yeah, this kicked off a massive discussion about surveillance, which I'm very glad about. I think especially who we trust with surveillance, because my opinion is always, if we're already gonna do the surveillance and surveil each other, I want it to at least be done by people who know how to secure data. Yeah, and another thing is this also brought up some older rumors where apparently during COVID, they were throwing parties inside their business, which we have proof of because they use Verkada cameras inside their own office. So yeah, they were throwing massive parties during COVID. Apparently people were doing lots of coke and being very misogynistic and hitting on their female coworkers, who they regularly spied on using the Verkada security cams. Very cool startup culture. So anyways, there is at least one good silver lining that I think most people haven't heard of yet who have heard of this story. Last year, they got fined $2.95 million by the FTC, both for these massive security lapses as well as for violating the CAN Spam Act, because of course these people misuse their email lists. Yeah, so this is basically that. So yeah, how do we use their tools against them? A society built on surveillance has one flaw, which you might have already noticed from what I've been talking about, which is that there is surveillance, and any surveillance that is done, any data that is collected, any tool that exists to surveil, can not only be used by the governments or the people intended to use them, but they can also be used by journalists, they can be used by activists, they can be accessed by anyone at the end of the day. And that's kind of what I want to talk about more. And that's also, Verkada was a good example of this, I think, of how surveillance existing is like the biggest problem with surveillance, is because it will always eventually be used against itself, because you can't create more of a paper trail on your crimes you're doing if you aren't surveilling yourself doing the crimes. So yeah, so here's some more ways we can use the tools of the intelligence state and intelligence industry for ourselves. Let's talk about OSINT, or how to find Adrian Dittman. So OSINT stands for open source intelligence. It's a form of intelligence that relies on mostly publicly available data and also some private data. Don't take this up with me. I don't know why it's called OSINT, even though it includes private data. You can ask the United States intelligence community about that. Yeah. And who is Adrian Dittman? So he's a Twitter influencer. He posts a lot about crypto and AI. He's a massive fan of Elon Musk. And he, for a while, kept replying with massive praise to Elon, and also had like various regular Twitter Space podcasts. And people realized that he was always praising Elon and also sounds vaguely like him. So they came to the conclusion, wait, this must be an alt of Elon. And this might sound like a big leap, but this wouldn't be the first time Elon has made an alt and used it to praise himself. I mean, he did also role play as his own son on Twitter and then used that to flirt with people. The reminder, his son is 3 years old. He pretended to be his own son and flirted with people. He admitted to this, and there's court documents proving this. Yeah, lonely man. Yeah. Anyways, so this still didn't all fit together for me because, again, Elon Musk, like, he loves making these alts, he loves praising himself, but as we have seen, for example, with that baby alt, he's also very bad at lying. He would have already admitted that this is him. And while Adrian Dittman kept playing into this idea that he might be Elon Musk, and while Elon Musk kind of played along because he gave both of them more and more press, it just didn't quite seem right to me. So Last December, I started investigating this together with my co-researcher, Ryan Fay, who's also usually my editor, and who's the only person who's heard this talk already. So yeah, so what did I do? I went to a paid breach search tool that I will not name because it's mostly used by the doxing community. It's quite useful though. Yeah, just a quick search for his alleged name, because I was like, okay, but everyone's just assuming that that's not his real name, but like, what if it were? So what I found was an email address belonging to him and an IP located in Fiji, leaked from a 2024 breach of an AI cutout tool. And Fiji would make sense for him to be, because in a Twitter space a few months ago, Adrian Dittman stated that he is German, grew up in Gibraltar with his family, moved to Morocco for a bit, and now lives in Oceania. Fiji is in Oceania, of course. And this would also explain his accent, because like a German guy who grows up in private schools in English-speaking countries, that's about the same dialect as a South African billionaire to me. So yeah, this just made sense. So then I went to another paid OSINT tool, which I need to clarify I get free access to as a journalist. This is OSINT Industries. It's a good tool. I'm not paid to say this, but they do give me free access. So I searched for this email on OSINT Industries. What I find is a number of other accounts tied to this email address, as well as a German and Fijian phone number. This, once again, checks out, right? There's also a Google account connected to the email with a single Google Maps review in Fiji. This review talks about steaks, and this will be relevant, trust me. This guy's obsessed with steaks. So yeah, a quick Google search for Dittman Fiji brings up a German family living in Fiji who own various companies in Germany, Switzerland, and Fiji. The family company registrations also show that they are from Germany, then lived in Gibraltar for a while, and moved to Fiji around 2012. It's all starting to match up, right? Since then now, his brother, who I follow on Instagram since then, has updated his Instagram bio to include a list of flags of where his family has lived in. It's like 10 flags, and the order of them also checks out with Adrian Dittman's Twitter story of where he's from. The main relevant company of theirs is Aquam Insula, a luxury water and yachting supply company. Again, this family is doing sustainable things on Fiji, such as selling water and yachting supplies. So just then looking up that company name on YouTube brings up a video on the YouTube channel of the Fijian government showing the opening of their maritime lifestyle warehouse of Aquam Insula. And in there, you can see Adrian Dittman and his partner in the foreground, which is what you can see on the slide background. That's Adrian Dittman. That's the guy who runs that Twitter account. He looks pretty German. Yeah, so in the same video, we also see a ring on Adrian's finger. And this ring matches a ring that is visible in some of his steak cooking streams on Twitter. As I said, this guy's obsessed with steaks. He makes like 1 steak cooking stream per week. Yeah, there's even more evidence we go over in the article, but I don't think that's that relevant here to just quickly give an overview. But for anyone who did read that reporting and was somehow still skeptical because like, oh, but like he sounds so similar and it would be funny if it were Elon. Month after after our initial reporting, I got tagged in this post on Blue Sky from a guy who was archiving every single cooking stream from Adrian Dittman. And what I expected to eventually happen happened, and we see a half-naked reflection of him in his stovetop, and you can see that he like looks the same like the guy we have seen before. So yeah, I think that should be pretty good proof. So yeah, I mean, yeah, he wasn't Musk. He still isn't Musk, and they aren't the same person. They both played into this because for Musk, it made him seem like a funnier guy than he is, which he loves when people think he's funny, and he loves when he's relevant. And for Adrian Dittman, well, his Twitter account is kind of partially how he makes money, and pretending to be Elon Musk and having this mystery around him gave him so many more followers because he was like the talk of the town. So he kept playing into this because, yeah, it makes money, I guess, to pretend to be a rich asshole. Yeah, so, but what if you didn't want to just find a random Twitter influencer? What if you wanted to find out about the rich and the powerful? Would these strategies work as well? And this is where we take a quick detour to Portugal and talk about my friendship with Luís Montenegro, the Prime Minister of Portugal, who recently was in the news a few months ago for being very corrupt and even worse at it than Eric Adams. He got paid 5,000 euros a month by like a pharmaceutical company to like some shell company. He and his children were all registered to, very stealthy. And he just suddenly had lots of cars that he didn't declare for his taxes. The usual fumble. Anyways, he got re-elected after that. He got even more votes than the first time he got voted in. I don't know. I guess corruption works. Yeah, so how did we find his number? Because, I mean, you can see me calling him there. Yeah, all it took was just Googling for the shell company's name plus phone number. And then it was just there on Google. I quickly checked with OSINT Industries, and the number was linked to a Telegram and a Signal account, which both had his name attached to it. So it wasn't just the company number, but his personal phone number. So at that point, I decided to message him on both Telegram and Signal just to ask for a comment on the corruption situation on those, just because it's really funny to message a prime minister on his private phone while he's going through like a corruption scandal. Yeah, he obviously never responded, right? I mean, who would have expected that? But yeah, so like 2 weeks ago, out of curiosity, I just tried to call him, tried to video call him, first in Telegram, which he hasn't been signed into for over a year, and on Signal, where messages get delivered. So he's clearly still using that. On Signal, it didn't go through. He didn't pick up, obviously. I tried to call him again later that same day, though. And Signal told me he needs to first accept my message request before I can call him, which leads me to believe that he did have my messages accepted and read, but then blocked me after I tried to call him. So the conclusion of this is you can't just bully these people. It's fun and it's free, and please don't get in trouble. Yeah, you can just message the Portuguese Prime Minister if you want. It's easy. You can just do that. If you're ever bored, you can find these people online quite easily. It's crazy. A friend of mine has like a really big Signal group chat full of all the phone numbers of the rich and famous people they know. I think Elon Musk is in there, various right-wing politicians from the US, and various presidents and stuff. It's quite funny. They're so easy to find. And I mean, they don't respond, but it's a fun little collection to have. Yeah. Another thing also related to Signal, the telemessage saga, a very recent example of how surveillance doesn't just go one way and the public can also just surveil the people who usually surveil. So yeah, this starts on April 30th, technically before that, but we will get into that. The US National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, is photographed by a Reuters photographer checking Signal on his phone during a White House meeting. This is funny because there was a previous Signal incident with Mike Waltz where he accidentally added a journalist to the group chat in which they were planning missile strikes against the Houthis. Very good idea, you should do that. Anyways, so we now know that he is using a modified version of the Signal app. As you can see at the bottom, it says, verify your TMSGNL pin and not verify your Signal pin. So journalists and activists alike immediately spring to action because it's like, wait, this seems interesting. Why are they using a weird version of Signal? May 1st, news stories start popping up about how he's using a modified version of Signal that has been modified by Telemessage, an Israeli-American company that was founded by Unit 8200 guys, alumni, Unit 8200 being the IDF cyber intelligence and signal intelligence section. Yeah, always interesting when these guys pop up. Yeah, and basically Telemessage exists to provide archival of messages in various messengers. They also have wrappers for Telegram and for WhatsApp, and they can capture text messages at the carrier level. And this is so employees of financial institutions or governments can just use their favorite messaging apps while their organization stays compliant with like various data archival regulations. For example, governments need to keep data so they can get FOIA about them, right? So you can still use Signal to text your government homies, but it will just get intercepted and archived in a cloud or something. I don't know. Yeah, so May 3rd, the source code of the Signal wrapper leaks. It was just available as a zip file on their WordPress frontend. It has hard-coded credentials inside it. It's now been like 3 days since this photo was taken by Reuters, and it's already going really great. Yeah, May 4th, telemessage is hacked. Hackers have found a really trivial vulnerability where their archival backend just has an endpoint that allows anyone to dump the server's memory without authentication of any kind. So over the course of about 24 hours, over 400 gigabytes of server memory is dumped from the server. And because the archival of these messages that are sent using end-to-end encrypted messengers such as Signal are sent to the telemessage server unencrypted in plain text for archival. This means that if any of these messages are in the memory of the time you called this endpoint, you just get those messages. So that makes Signal entirely useless because, well, it's not doing anything, especially if you can just have this super simple backdoor. Yeah, contained within there are like plain text messages, metadata such as the contacts and group names, and yeah, by May 19th, these 400 gigabytes of data are published by DDoS Secrets for journalists only because there's lots of personal information in there. According to Reuters, we are now gone full circle, and Micah Lee, who analyzed the data set, it had around 60,000 messages that were captured during those 24 hours. Those messages include messages from CBP officials, US diplomatic staffers, at least one White House staffer who apparently has 680 hours on Fortnite, members of the US Secret Service, the DC police, employees of Andreessen Horowitz, JP Morgan, and many other, especially financial institutions. So yeah, not only the government can spy on us, but we can just do it too, and it's way too easy. And I mean, like, yeah, this is comical. Anyways, now I want to get to another topic that I was asked to talk about by Freya, which is the connection Swiss universities have to surveillance, because they are not as innocent as one might think. Or, well, if you are at the Swiss university, you probably don't think they're innocent. But anyways, hacking team in Swiss universities. What is hacking team? They're an Italian cybersecurity and offensive intrusion and surveillance company. Their customers included governments all around the world, as well as Mexican cartels and just about everyone they could get money from. Yeah, in 2015, they get hacked by Phineas Fisher. All their emails, everything gets published, all their source code, the fact that they reuse passwords literally everywhere and use passwords such as Wolverine, all lowercase. Yeah. So by 2016, their license to sell spyware outside of Europe gets revoked again. It was already previously revoked, but they did some lobbying. So yeah, anyways, so that seemed like it was kind of it, right? Their founder has since kind of gone off the rails and had like various psychotic episodes publicly on Twitter, where he now believes he is being followed. Very funny given, like, I don't like making fun of this, but like this guy was the one following people. Anyways, in 2019, the company is bought by the Swiss/Italian Cyber Group and turned into Memento Labs, which is of course a way less scary name than a hacking team. This seems way more like, look at their logo on the right. This definitely isn't an evil company that does evil things. Anyways, when asked about this eventually by, I think, SRF, the CEO and founder of Cyber, Paolo Lezzi, claimed that the company only provides spyware in compliance with, in quotes, all the conditions of the international community, especially the Western community. I think this kind of says it all already. So yeah, where do the Swiss universities come into this now? So in 2020, in the Cyber and Subsi, which I believe is like the Dicinesi sister of ETH, as far as I understand this, I'm not entirely sure, but they're like a university in Ticino. They've received funding from InnoSwiss, which is the federal science funding company, to jointly develop the tools Preventer, stupid name, and Monitor, even stupider name. Preventer is a voice recognition and transcription tool that is meant to speed up finding people and doing surveillance shit. This was developed with public funding money at a public university and is now being sold by this private company. Same with Monitor, which is a Tor de-anonymization tool that is supposed to help catch criminals. This has apparently been sold to Iran, among other countries, who are very good and nice. And yeah. So they love selling these tools and other surveillance tools they have that were just developed by them themselves at international surveillance conventions, for example, at ISS World in Dubai. They also have resellers in Dubai. They sell a lot to the Gulf states. They sell a lot to oppressive regimes in Africa. So yeah, so much for they only do the good surveillance now, which isn't a thing anyways, but you know. Yeah, they also, in the Cyber and Subsi, also have various other partnerships that they that apparently Subsi just says, yeah, that's like okay, and whatever, we're just doing science. Very neutral. They have other programs such as the Alliance SOS, which is a Dicinesi cantonal program where they help companies when they suffer cyber attacks. Together, the public university and this private company that does cybersecurity and also just a little bit of spyware. Memento Labs employees were also talking at a Swiss Department of Foreign Affairs organized conference for governments in Southeast Asia, where they were speaking from an attacker perspective. I sure wonder how they got that. So yeah, the Swiss federal government and also various cantonal governments are just openly collaborating with this company that has a past as one of the most notorious spyware companies in Europe and in the world. Barely anyone ever talks about this, but yeah, this company is just in Lugano and in Milan. This is just here, they just do this. They also took over all the customers that that hacking team had before it became Memento Labs. So I don't know. There's not much to say here. I don't see this being very ethical. But hey, if universities can get funding by working with them, that's cool, isn't it? So yeah, the fight starts with you. Yeah, this fight against the rising tide of fascism has to be fought on all fronts. Be that on the street, on the internet as hacktivists, be that as journalists, or everywhere else where the future is being built. We are stronger together, and everyone can join this fight with the means that they have available to them. That's basically the message I want to end on. So yeah, thanks for listening. You can find me in all these places, especially at the apéro afterwards. Also, on my website, there's also ways to securely contact me to give me tips, information, or just ask me more questions that you don't want to ask over insecure channels. You can find my Signal and my PGP key there. So yeah, that's it from me. Thanks a lot for having me.
Okay. So I think the next speaker is Phil Zimmerman. Do we have? Yeah, there we go. Who I think for a lot of people hardly needs any introduction. The inventor of PGP, and Phil is going to speak a bit about privacy. Can you hear us all right, Phil?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We hear you perfectly.
Okay, great. Well, okay. So I've been working on privacy issues for about 35 years, a little bit longer actually. When I worked on cryptographic projects before that. And I used to give a lot of talks where I would say that that if you build a surveillance society, that sometime in the future down the road, your democratically elected government might turn evil. You know, you could have an election and elect somebody evil, and then they would inherit all the surveillance capabilities that the voters approved of when it was a benign government. But if it's not a benign government later on, then what are you going to do? The surveillance, infrastructure is still there. And when I used to talk about that, it was a lot more theoretical than it is today. Because what we see today is that democracies all over the world are, electing autocrats that, win elections, and then they use their executive power to dismantle all the components of a free society that could stand in their way to stay in power. And, Viktor Orban won a free and fair election. Donald Trump won a free and fair election. We see this happening all over the world. And so this is no longer a hypothetical case. It's now become very real. And so one of the things that I often ran into is that when I was making such warnings decades ago, it was like people didn't take it as seriously because they had a benign government that they trusted. This is especially true for Western European democracies. And, why should they worry? But now, there's disinformation campaigns from Russia that can turn the voters in such a way that they vote for pro-Putin, pro-Putin candidates, and you could have autocrats rise, and it's much more real today. So, if you want to oppose a government like that when it comes to power, you have to organize politically and try to win the next election cycle. But time is passing, and with each day that passes under a newly elected wannabe autocrat, he's disassembling the methods that are available to you, the tools that are available to you to win the next election cycle. He can clamp down on a free press. He can, change the judiciary to put loyalist judges in. He controls the prosecution, the prosecutors. He can get control of the election machinery. And, this is what happens. And so you don't get too many chances at this. So you have to organize politically, but in order to do that, you need to have privacy. Because if you don't have privacy, if you don't have the ability to talk to your like-minded friends who want to win the next election cycle, then the autocratic government can monitor your communications and arrest you or arrest all your friends. And so it becomes more and more difficult in a society that has all this surveillance. And if you don't have the privacy tools available to you, then you get a highly stable autocracy. It's much more difficult for political opposition to organize in China because they have like 1 billion video cameras, and they have AI behind those cameras, and they can identify people and monitor their communications. And so it becomes nearly impossible for them to organize politically to try to bring about a democratic change. So privacy is essential for democracy. But there's also another dimension to this. Throughout my activism and career, I've always argued this from the point of view of personal privacy and just privacy of society. But now it seems that we can make a possibly more effective argument by pointing out the national security implications of not having end-to-end encryption. A lot of European countries have purchased cell phone infrastructure, like 5G equipment, from China, from Huawei, for example. And Huawei was founded by the Chinese military. And Chinese law requires, tech companies in China to do whatever the government asks them to do to provide them with intelligence. And so it's clear that Huawei is a bad choice to install in democratic countries that don't want to be surveilled by China. If everybody deploys Huawei equipment all over Europe, and there are a lot of European companies that have done that, then it gives China signals intelligence capabilities comparable to NSA. Now, I usually try to point out that NSA is, part of the US, which is a NATO ally, but I'm not so sure that I can make that argument now in light of what's happened in the past few months. But, the powerful SIGINT, signals intelligence from NSA, has usually been in alignment with the needs of, all of NATO. But now, if the U.S. has been forced to take the side of Russia by the inhabitant of the White House, then I don't know what to say about that. But traditionally, the U.S. has been in favor of NATO. It founded NATO. And NATO, or something that can replace NATO, is important now for defending Europe. I've been to Ukraine many times. I've been to Russia a few times, and it's clear that that Europe must be defended and Ukraine must be defended. And so having privacy tools is part of that defense. European countries should abandon Huawei infrastructure. They should replace it with equipment purchased from European countries, or at least not Chinese companies. So I think we have now a national security argument in favor of end-to-end encryption. It used to be back in the 90s when we fought the crypto wars, we were up against national security arguments from the other side. They were arguing that it's a threat to national security to let people have strong encryption. Now I think it's a threat to national security to not allow people to have strong encryption. In fact, the legislative environment has shifted over the years. In the 90s, when we were fighting the crypto wars, we had to justify ourselves for wanting to have strong encryption. People would look at us with suspicion if we tried to make that argument. And they would say, well, why do you need strong encryption? Are you up to no good? Are you a criminal? Are you a drug dealer? Are you a terrorist? Well, you had to justify it. But the legislative environment that we're in today is very different. Now, if you don't have strong encryption, you have to justify it. The US passed laws. It started in California, but it spread to many other states and then became federal law, that that companies have to protect their corporate records. That if you were a businessman that left your laptop in a taxi and it had 500,000 customer names on it, then there was a law passed in California decades ago that said you have to tell all your customers that now their records have been compromised. And so other states embraced that too, and so it became law in the US and also in Europe. And so, the legislative environment now favors end-to-end encryption. Now, the reason why the governments took this stand against encryption goes back to World War II. When they were breaking the German Enigma cipher and the German Lorenz cipher and the Japanese ciphers. They did this at Bletchley Park, and they did it in a highly secret environment. And nobody leaked anything because everyone who worked at Bletchley Park was aware of the moral implications of their work. The Germans were bombing the Brits, every night. And so it was clear to them that they better not leak anything. And they worked on it, and they developed this capability that shortened the war by a couple of years. Not just the war in Europe, but they broke the Japanese ciphers as well. So they shortened the Pacific War. It led to the Battle of Midway being won by the Americans. And that shortened the war by a couple of years. It saved millions of lives. And so governments, in particular the US and Britain, developed this attitude that it was important to maintain the capability to break the encryption algorithms of their enemies, because it saved millions of lives in World War II. And, back at that time, nobody had computers. And so, encryption was mainly used by governments. But fast forward a few decades to the 1990s, and the world has changed. It's not World War II anymore. The internet was becoming more and more important. Everyone had computers, and everyone used the internet to communicate. So it was time to liberalize the policies that we had inherited from World War II, and say, okay, we have to wake up and smell the coffee. It's essential for our economy and for protecting the civil liberties of our citizens to let them use strong encryption. And that's the climate of the crypto wars in the 1990s. And we prevailed. In 2000, the US dropped their export controls. The French had dropped their domestic controls a couple years earlier. And the Brits also dropped their controls. And so we found ourselves now in the world today where strong encryption is everywhere. It's in our browsers, it's in our mail clients, it's in our VPNs, it's in, it's so pervasive, and our society depends on it. And so, so that's where we are now. And we're starting to see some pushback from some countries saying that there should be a backdoor, but they're 20 years late. We're thoroughly entrenched now with strong end-to-end encryption, and we have to hang on to that. I normally take questions, but I understand that they're going to organize questions at the end.
Yes.
So I can't take questions. If I don't get questions, sometimes I stall because all of my talks are spontaneous.
No worries, Phil. That was fantastic, and I think really good to highlight, especially the victories, and very important one being that end-to-end encryption, as you said, has become the standard at this point. So on that note, and please do start writing down questions, because we've come to our final speaker. And after that, we'll open up to both people here in the room, but also everybody that's watching the live stream. And feel free to direct your question at any of the speakers that have been on today. But now I'd like to welcome Vikram to the stage.
Hello, can people hear me? Cool.
All good? Thank you. Cool. Hello, everyone. I'm Vikram. I'm a software engineer who studied computer science and then worked in big tech companies like Microsoft and then most recently Google for 13 years out of my 24 years as a software engineer till last month when I quit Google. So I'm here to talk about AI ethics and corporate accountability. I hope to essentially connect with students of ETH to show that this is a path that is probably this is something you will encounter as you graduate from this university and go to the industry. So I think this is something very important to discuss about. And when I was asked to talk about AI ethics, I wanted to focus on one of the what I feel is the most important part of AI ethics, which is the impact that the work we do in the AI field can have towards either promoting or really affecting human rights of a large amount of people around the world, right? This is the kind of overview of my talk. I think I have 15 minutes, so it's going to be a quick, a very high level overview of things. Just give a background about where AI companies and governments are currently, and I feel it's in a very unique position today, and just discuss about how it is sort of different from the previous kinds of collaboration between companies, private companies and governments. And since I worked in Google for most of my career, I'm going to use Google as an example, really, and talk about the past, how Google dealt with some of these issues, and how employees dealt with some of these issues, and what are we facing at present. Specifically, I'd like to go into a contract that Google has with the Israeli government called Project Nimbus, that is of, again, prime concern of AI ethics in human rights. I think Project Nimbus, in my opinion, is one of the largest really problem that we have in the AI industry, right? And then just go into what sort of tools that we can employ to hold corporations in this really new environment, very challenging environment. How can we hold them accountable, and what each one of us can do about it, right? So to just set the stage, of course, Silicon Valley technology companies and governments have had close collaborations forever, right? Governments have been funding computer science projects and universities in the industry for a very long time, but really it is different this time, right? Tech workers separate from the companies have largely remain adverse or against harmful use of their technologies, right? And really there was a separation between the output coming out of a technology company and the government, right? So dual use in some sense previously meant there's a kind of a technology or software or hardware that was produced in the consumer side, allowed for use by different people, and really it was
either the research or the product was picked up by the government sort of in a separated manner, right? Right now, in the new like mad AI race era, companies and governments really are think that they need each other so much more. That has really led to a very, I mean, from a human rights perspective, not so great setup. Right, companies need large amounts of capital and like energy at an unprecedented level for running their AI data centers and AI compute. And really, they're looking for loosened regulations from the government. And so they are much willing to work with the governments. Everybody saw all the CEOs line up for Trump's inauguration, really trying to essentially, I mean, this is again something unprecedented, right? This has never happened in the history of the industry before, and that to Trump, right? So, and governments increasingly rely on all these big tech and upcoming AI companies like OpenAI, I mean, the so-called smaller players also, but they're really big, Anthropic, and really they want to work with all of them for their big data and AI technology. And of course, we discuss the different like surveillance and like harmful ways in which these technologies can be used by unaccountable unit like a government. They really, so what is different this time is they really can't replicate many of these recent AI developments in-house, or at least at that in a reasonable time frame, right? So what this has led to is actually companies and governments and really their defense departments working so close to each other that we as tech workers are maintaining like these live servers in which these government departments, including their defense departments, operate, right, making us deeply complicit with whatever they are doing, right? These cloud systems cannot run on their own. This is not like the previous generation where you throw software across the wall and you don't care who uses it. No, this is like a system where day in and day out, software, hardware, like the whole company infrastructure, like everybody contributes to a cloud system that is now being used by different defense departments, right? And that really puts all of us as like tech contributors, even if you're doing research with these companies, these get packaged up into cloud offerings and then offered like without any restrictions to different governments and defense departments, right? So really, I want to emphasize this point that we are in a very like unprecedented like landscape right now. That's very concerning. So to quickly go around like the specific example of Google, slightly in the past and now the present, dealing with the kind of concerns that I just mentioned that Google employees have brought up. In 2018, there was a project called Project Maven. It was a contract with the US Defense Department to use AI to identify targets from drone imagery. So, of course, this went very much against like Google's principles of not building software that harms people. Employees staged a walkout, signed petitions, many resigned. But the final straw was a press article which showed that the executives lied about the scope of the project. They kept saying it was only used for non-offensive purposes, and it was just a one-off project. Both of them were revealed to be lies. And that led to this kind of internal pressure and some amount of shame in like on Google executives' part, led them to actually not renew the contract. Unfortunately, coming to the present, I want to talk about a project called Project Nimbus. this is a $1.2 billion contract between Google, Amazon, and the Israeli government. And really, majority of it is the Israeli Ministry of Defense and Israeli Defense Force. Last year, employees staged a sit-in. We were signed petitions. We sent like human rights due diligence requests to the human rights team. Really, all of them were blocked by the company. And it feels like the company it's taking a very hard stance as to like wanting to continue to work with this government, irrespective of the scope of damage to human rights that this can cause, right? And Google reacted by actually firing 50 of my coworkers last year just for staging a sit-in. And really, this was the same Google which had like "Don't be evil" a few years back, but really they are leaning onto the "be evil" part right now, right? So I want to focus a bit on Project Nimbus, which is really, again, as I said, one of the most concerning projects that Google Cloud and Google as a whole has with the Israeli government and the Israeli military. This is just a screenshot from a video of IDF's main kernel talking about how, I don't know whether it's visible, like public cloud providers like Google, Amazon, Microsoft are really like provide a wonderful world out there for them to use, right? So let's go into a little bit into details. So Project Nimbus, again, just like Maven, is something the Google executives and really the PR machine has been saying that is only for civilian use. Right, but after October 2023, when the Israeli Ministry of Defense and the Israeli Defense Force mounted a siege on Gaza, it was becoming very clear that really they were using all these public clouds for really military and surveillance applications, which was exactly the thing that Google said they were never going to be used for. Right, so we found this through, again, reporting on different like media outlets, both the Plus 972 magazine and different media outlets in the US. And actually, one of our sources, main sources of information was IDF itself. Right, IDF went out in an event called IT for IDF in July 2024. And again, the screenshot that you saw of the kernel from the last screenshot was essentially part of a talk where she was saying how all these big public cloud providers, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, had a crazy wealth of big data and AI services, right? And specifically saying this providing very significant operational effectiveness during like the siege of Gaza after October 2023, right? So, and we also found from a 972 magazine reporting that Amazon was being used. Amazon Cloud Service was being used for like holding, and this is from a source working with the IDF who said these cloud providers are great for providing endless storage. For really, they were open about for holding intelligence on almost everyone on Gaza, right? Again, something that all these companies have said would never happen on their public cloud. And the funny thing is, they frame it as if, oh, the Israeli military will never put sensitive military data on a public cloud. But what the Israeli military doesn't consider as sensitive information is actually all phone calls, like every information of Palestine, Palestinians in every part, like Gaza, West Bank, because for them, if that leaks, it doesn't matter, right? So really what they mean by sensitive data and what is actually sensitive from a human rights perspective are two very different things, right? And really, it has led to like many Googlers asking the question that like, are we complicit in aiding the siege, right? And this has been described by many human rights organizations as a genocide, which I mean, I can't think of anything more important than thinking about this problem at this point in the tech industry, right? So, so I think Jaya also mentioned two systems, Lavender, and actually I want to talk about another system called Where's Daddy, which is the sickest name for an AI project. So Lavender, I mean, this again, I want to give as a background about, all right, Google, Amazon, Microsoft are working with foreign military, right, providing AI to let them do whatever they want. What are they doing? What are they capable of doing, right? So I want to cover that. So Lavender AI, again, was a system almost like advertised by the IDF itself from their sources, right? It's an AI-based human targeting system, again, using signals from various sources of surveillance that they have on Gazans, right? And this ties to the previous slide, because some of the signals, because the IDF themselves said it didn't fit in their private cloud because it was getting too large, where then moving it to the public cloud where they can just pay and get extra storage space, right? So potentially, some of these signals are stored in the public in the public cloud provided by Google, Amazon, or Microsoft. And these AI systems are making target decisions with minimal human intervention, sometimes as less than, like as soon as the target is identified, vetted by a human in just 20 seconds, right? And even according to some of their own sources, it was in most cases just checking whether the target was a male, right? That's it. And again, Jaya talked about the relaxed collateral damage constraints also. This system has, right? And again, their operators themselves were surprised that they were allowed to like even target what they call a junior operative, even when there were like 20 other uninvolved civilians there in the site, right? Or for a senior member, it could be as high as 100. And all these are well documented as to what happened, right? More towards like nearer to October 2023, right? And they themselves say the system, I mean, the system is really tuned for one goal. The targets never end, right? That's it. That's their main goal. I mean, they are not trying to be precise. They are not trying to, I mean, like every other constraint is relaxed. They really want an unending, they really wanted an unending source of targets. And that's what this AI system was providing. And really, again, this is like the first AI-powered genocide that we are seeing. And really, the biggest companies in the industry are aiding them, right? And that's another sick graphic from like the intelligence directorate explaining how the signals like relate to each other with what looks like women, children, like and yeah, it made to look like, I mean, this is like banality of evil right there. Like the second system I want to talk about is Where's Daddy. I have to stop every time I say that word. It's actually an AI system. So Lavender produces the targets. Where's Daddy provides an alarm when the target enters their home, where they know that they can have the maximum chance of eliminating the target, right? This usually, I mean, not usually, this almost always meant that they're with their family. And there's no denying they knew it because the name of the project is Where's Daddy, right? And again, from the sources from IDF itself, they were saying initially there was a subset of the Lavender output which was fed into Where's Daddy. But almost like a few weeks later, almost everybody identified by Lavender as a target was getting fed into VASDaddy, right? So this meant tens of thousands of targets, and they were with their family, right? Children and wife, who are just considered like collateral damage that's acceptable, right? What this led to is, I mean, we have seen what it led to: entire families being wiped out, and really we really need to come into terms with how evil these systems are and how deeply connected our technology industry in all of this, right? So I want to say Project Nimbus is definitely one of the most important ethical questions that we as a software industry or tech industry have, in my opinion. But I'm even scared to say that Project Nimbus is only the beginning, right? And really, this follows almost the same pattern as the regular arms industry, where Palestine and Palestinians are used as a laboratory and test subjects for exporting essentially tools of occupation, oppression, and really destruction all over the world, right? And this is what we as tech workers are being co-opted into without none of our consent, right? So, and Google, even before all this, right after closing Project Maven, still went ahead and bid for a US Department of Defense contract called Joint Warfighting Cloud capability, which is again like providing cloud capabilities, AI and big data to defense projects in the US. And really, after Trump has been elected, Google has been emboldened to do a lot of things in 2025. Every time I try making this list, I miss at least 2 things because that's how bad it's been this year, right? I mean, the main thing is Google has dropped its AI principles. One of the main tenet of it was not using our AI tools for harming people. And really that has been replaced with a wishy-washy language that says we want to promote democracies around the world, right? And Google has announced it's going to work with the CBP, US Customs and Border Patrol, for adding AI capabilities to Israeli manufacturer like Elbit manufactured cameras at the US border. The other horrible thing Google has announced is providing Gen AI platform for Lockheed Martin, which is again one of the main arms dealer involved in like the total destruction of Gaza and different places around the world, providing a Gen AI platform to power the AI factory, right? I mean, again, none of this is being done with employee consent or in line with any of our values, really. And again, we can't leave Palantir out of the picture. And Google is very happy to work with Palantir. They are expanding partnership with Palantir, who have inside connections with governments already to target federal services with security approved services, right? And so I think it's imperative for us to, I mean, what's happening in with Project Nimbus and the ongoing genocide is definitely the prerogative right now, but it is like of utmost importance for us to stop this here, because if we don't, it's not going to stop here, right? This is going to spread as like tools of like oppression and destruction all over the world, right? And really, Google is not very different from an arms dealer anymore, in my opinion. You should ask about them when they come to your campus. You should ask about them about Project Nimbus and really ask them like, why are you doing like, you should go sit with Lockheed Martin, right? Don't come to the AI for good side ever again, right? So quickly about what we can do. I mean, this is just like general ideas. Internal pressure used to work. like workers organizing and pressurizing these companies from inside used to work. Companies have completely switched. They are, I mean, if you thought outside world is becoming authoritarian, autocratic, work at Google, right? You would know, right? Like they would fire you, they would censor you. Like we cannot use the word genocide inside Google because it distresses people. So really, like, I mean, we have to really start using different tools to even like escape the surveillance of the company, right? I think we also need a multi-pronged approach of using external pressure, media, and really like universities like ETH to pressurize Google. Also look at legal frameworks, like, hey, is there a local law in Switzerland that really requires Google to inform them if they are helping a foreign military? By the way, there is, right? And the Swiss government is dragging its feet and like saying, hey, is this really dual use? We don't know. Like, yeah. So I put media twice, so I don't know what was supposed to come there. Sorry? Awareness, apparently. So again, what can we do as individuals? I think this is a time when tech workers and tech students must come together. And really, we have to create transdisciplinary coalitions. I haven't thought about hacktivists before, but I should think more about collaborating with them. Communication outwards and raise awareness everywhere. Thanks to ETH for giving me this opportunity to talk about these things. And of course, like use NGOs to provide like safe spaces for exchange, which I'm again sorry to say, I don't know. Is ETH really a safe space? I don't know. Like we need more safe spaces, right? We can discuss. We are open to discussing more creative ideas at the Apero. So I want to end with a more hopeful message. Is the testing time, and also emphasize the importance, right? This goes to the core of integrity and humanity, right? And we have to reclaim our agency. We are not just drones or like worker ants or gears in a big machinery, right? Our stance matters, right? And we really have to be aware of our potential as individuals and really create like a future, a good future that we can envision for ourselves and not just sleepwalk into this dystopian future the companies are painting, right? All right, thank you.
Okay, so I think what we'll do now, I mean, I'm going to selfishly ask my fellow panelists some questions before I open up to the crowd, if that's all right. When I was hearing everyone speak, there was this meme that came to mind that I saw recently, which was on Instagram, and it's this guy that's ranting for a couple minutes about where are all the hacktivists, where are all the hackers? And talking about this, rich history of hacktivism, and we had the kind of like 90s and early 2000s, and it sounded like all these cool anarchists were like, messing with the system and everything. And we do have a wonderful hacktivist here, but somehow it seems like the mood has shifted. And I was wondering if the speakers could talk a little bit about that. Do you think that this is there's a bit of a kind of lull in hacktivism, but that actually a revolt of the tech workers is coming? Vikram, I liked the point that you made, that you pointed out that actually like a lot of the workers in these companies, especially in Google, really disagree with what's going on in leadership right now. And that's always very heartening to hear. But are we starting to see some kind of organized counterforce, and will people be held accountable, or what's the mood?
I don't really have much of a perspective into tech companies besides talking with people. I have not worked in the industry in almost 5 years now. That's crazy. But yeah, I do think there's generally more of an interest in hacktivism and reviving hacktivism. I think a lot of this kind of started with me and around me. Not trying to take credit for it, but there was around 2020 or so, this revival kind of started where hack and leak became a bigger thing again, where organizations like Data Secrets started taking the place of WikiLeaks, and now we're hoping that there's also going to be more other organizations that can help with publishing, because relying on just one organization has never been a good idea and is still not a good idea. And I know that the people at Data Secrets agree with me. We have talked about this before. I think that's also the tasks people don't think about that often. It's providing publishing, for example. It's all of these background tasks that are much more journalistic, where you don't directly like hack anything. It's the communications part of activism that's just as important, which is kind of part of what I do. That's why I do journalism now. It's because I think this bridge is really important, and I think is part of what has helped activists be understood by media. And because I can bring people to media, I can help journalists find people to talk to when something leaks. I now usually the way I hear about big hacks and stuff is because I immediately have like 5 to 10 different journalists in my Signal DMs being like, hey, have you heard about this? Do you have any info for me? I often do. So yeah, that's kind of often a task that I do now, but that's another thing that more and more people should be doing. And then on the tech worker side, obviously there's always the thing where you have insiders, you have whistleblowers, but I think it's also just not just about hacktivism in this traditional sense, but also, yeah, about worker organizing and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I mentioned Project Maven and like contrasting it with Nimbus, really, I think we as tech industry are not great, especially given the US background, are not great at organizing. This is something we are actually trying to get better at, especially in terms of sustained organization. For something like Project Maven, a group of people got together ad hoc, did a walkout, some people created memes in the internal, like it was really like a very ad hoc, and it wasn't like organized in the conventional sense, but it was sufficient. But right now, the amount of retaliation that is being mounted against workers is so extreme. I think we need to get into more traditional organization like methods, like try to like how are we going to talk to individuals on a one-on-one basis and have a sustained like organizing effort. I mean, unions are really a bad word in the tech industry, but that's exactly what we need, right? And really, and even as a union, you need to have the right kind of, again, ethical like background and have a backbone really to say, all right, this is a concern of the employees that we are willing to support, right? I think this is a challenge. I think every tech worker foresees themselves as the future CEO, so they will never join a union, right? So, but really, we are in a position where unless we get together and have like a combined like organizer force for like dealing with what these companies are doing, we are never going to see this thing move. So it's a challenge, but I think we are starting, we are trying our best. And again, I think we are trying to also leverage help from outside, right? If things are getting clamped down inside, I think we are trying also figuring out avenues on how like people on the outside can also help.
And then I guess partially related to that, I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to open it out to you guys. So have your questions ready. Yeah, related to that. So this question of like, okay, how can we organize? I think before getting to that point, there's also the question of what is the condition, the situation that we're organizing in right now. Again, Vikram, you mentioned that this is unprecedented times. I completely agree. I think this level of closeness between government and big tech companies, combined with this level of technological power, which is really what large-scale surveillance systems and AI really is, is quite unprecedented. And I've been kind of toying, initially, like after the US election, I was thinking, is this like a coup of big tech, a coup of big tech taking over big government? Or is it actually a coup of fascism taking over big tech? And it seems to be a little bit of a combination of both. And so, it was very good to hear you, Phil, talking about, the kind of wins that we've had in the battle for privacy-preserving technology, especially end-to-end encryption, and how that is the foundations for democracy. And of course, Maya, your counter-surveillance tactics. And there is that rich history of kind of hacktivism and leaking and holding power to account that we can kind of draw from. But if you take a moment to think a little bit about what is kind of what's changed or what's unique about this moment in time, or what are the kind of new types of challenges, what does that look like to you? And are there new types of tools that we need in order to organize against the rise of kind of tech-fueled fascism today? I mean, you've mentioned traditional organizing methods and trade unions and this sort of thing. Is there anything else that comes to mind?
I think what I always have to say, and why I think activism is so important, even though it's not the only form of activism that's effective, I always need to say this. I'm not trying to say, "Ooh, everyone needs to just do activism, everything else is bullshit." Like I said, this is a like multi-front fight. But what used to be different, even like just a decade ago or 2 decades ago, is that you could go to places and protest things that are there. Nowadays, everything's in some like public cloud, and it's quite hard to protest a public cloud on the street. So I think that's like a thing that a lot of organizing outside of activism and outside of these digital spaces, like non-tech organized spaces, are kind of lagging behind on. It's this understanding that there's so much stuff you can't just go in front of, so much stuff you can't just like easily physically shut down. Like you can try and shut down a data center, good luck. But it's I think these things that people still need to adjust to in just more traditional activism, which is still important, but I think some parts of the focus there need to be rethought a bit, because like where do we protest now? Or where do we go to find these things?
Yeah. I mean, I guess one of the reasons why I got into privacy technology was exactly because I pictured it as a type of blockade on the data pipeline. So I'm wondering, Phil, do you want to speak to some of that?
Yeah, I'd like to. The way in which I try to change things is I don't do it through protest. I used to do that in the 1980s when I was a peace activist. I've been in jail with Carl Sagan for civil disobedience at the Nevada nuclear weapon test site. And that's something I did at that time. But now I feel like I'd rather work on trying to get our governments to act ethically. And that means elections. That means winning elections. And I mean, take, for example, when you remember I said in my talk that nobody who worked at Bletchley Park did whistleblowing or anything like that, because they all understood the morality of the work that they were doing. London was being bombed by the Luftwaffe every night, and it was clear to them what the moral implications of their work were. So they were all aligned. Well, when Snowden came out with his whistleblowing, he was getting certainly a lot of press attention, but he wasn't the only whistleblower. There were maybe half a dozen other people that were also whistleblowing. And these whistleblowing behaviors happened because NSA was instructed by the Bush administration to, violate laws, to spy on Americans. And when NSA and other intel agencies were created, they were created with the understanding that they were foreign intelligence agencies. They were supposed to increase situational awareness for the U.S. government, so that when we fight wars, we can intercept the communications of the enemy, not to spy on Americans. And if you go back before 9/11, that things really got bad after 9/11 in terms of government behavior. There were no whistleblowers at NSA during the Cold War, for example. because they were, they were fighting the Soviet Union and China, and they were a foreign intel agency that was intercepting foreign communications for the purpose of looking out after the national interest of a democracy and helping their European allies do the same. GCHQ, same kind of thing. But after 9/11, they were spying on their own population. And when governments go in that direction, well, Russia spies on its population, and they use that capability to suppress dissent and put people in jail for saying anything critical of the Russian government.
Yep.
I don't think of, my general attitude is not to sort of protest against a private company. I think that a private company should not be selling spyware to Iran. In fact, I would never work on spyware because I think it's wrong. But if I did work on spyware, I wouldn't sell it to Iran. And NSA is capable of developing its own spyware. And if they do, they're not going to sell it to Iran. They're not going to sell it to, our adversaries. But private companies that are motivated just by what's on the bottom line, the revenue, they'll sell it to anybody who gives them money. And so, I'd rather have a democratically elected government that behaves well. One of my favorite TV shows many years ago was The West Wing, because it portrayed a White House that was moral, that was ethical.
Yeah.
I want to have a government like that. Why can't we do that? Well, we have to organize politically so that we can have a government like that.
Yeah. Political organizing, I think it's a really good point, and a very important one at this point in time. And I also like the point that you made earlier, Phil, that when you develop, unfortunately, we develop surveillance capabilities for a government, you don't know who's going to be in power in the next election cycle. So It might not be a good idea in the first place, right? So what's your take, Vikram, in terms of the challenges today
I think
for organizing?
definitely the political environment, especially in the US, has made it much more challenging, definitely. Right, I can see my technology colleagues in the US actually being fearful of what it means to organize now. In the US, with Palantir-aided databases trying to track down any person who has essentially said anything against the siege on Gaza, right? So I think definitely, but to be fair, this started in October 2023 when we had a different president, and it didn't make a difference, right? I think this is yeah, sure, we'll fix it in 50 years, but we need a solution right now, right? And I think that's where technology students, workers come into place. It's already too late. I'm sorry, it's already too late, but there are still lives to be saved. I think we need quicker action. This is a stain that's never going to be removed, but let's try our best, right? So, we need quicker action than educating the government, right? So, we would eventually get there, but really it has to start from somewhere. And we are talking about Google, right? I didn't even talk about Amazon or Microsoft. They probably never had a pretense of being good, but if we had lost Google, I think really we have lost everything, right? So we relied too much on these private companies for sure for a lot of these things. Even something like DEI, like how much we relied on private companies to for social causes. I think at this point, our whole worldview is turned upside down. I don't think we can rely on these companies. We have to take matters into our hands as tech workers, as people who have power, right? Without us, the cloud doesn't run, right? So, you wanted to shut down the cloud. Yeah, it is possible to shut down the cloud. Take a sick leave for 3 months, so.
Yeah, that's a good action to organize around. Mass sick leave. Okay, I want to open up to the floor. Any questions either here in the room or online? Don't be shy. Yes.
Can't hear them.
Yeah, no problem. So seeing as, we rely so much on Google and these major tech companies, maybe you can give some examples of ways you can move away from these larger companies, such as like, gosh, it's left my head, but various email hosting, document hosting, etc.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think we'd have to be like strategic about it. Definitely, like hurting the bottom line as a strategy is a good action to pursue, right? And definitely, there are different organizations working to. I mean, there's currently a BDS call against Microsoft to not buy Xbox products. Something like that is easier targeted and can have immediate effect. Going against Google is much more difficult, right? I mean, again, we trusted too much on the goodness of a private company, and it's going to take a lot more to disentangle. And it's not just, I mean, they are everywhere, right? I don't, this is my personal opinion, you cannot get away. Like you have to study in a university, do research, get funding, you go out, start a company, get capital for starting. It's all going to come from Google, Amazon, Microsoft in some way, form or the other, right? I don't think, I mean, maybe we need to think more deeply into it, right? But there are definitely some very strategic, like you can't have Google in a conference talking about good anymore, right? That's a very good way to boycott Google, right?
Don't be evil.
Yeah, you're never ever going to say like you are the good guys anymore, right? You identified yourself as a private company working for profit, sure, that's your image from now on, right? Let's get them out of different conferences that talk about like human progress and technology for good and stuff like that. I think that could be more effective.
I have nothing really to add. I mean, there's alternatives for a lot of things like email and things like that, which is also like nice to move away from Google for privacy. It's just a lot of trouble. I'm not going to recommend any specific companies here. I don't like doing that. But like there's guides online for how to de-Google your life to at least some degree. And I think there's also it's much hard. It's not that easy, but it's somewhat possible on a personal level. But I think it's much harder to move away from these companies on a professional level, like even as a small company, because even just hosting things online, if your budget isn't high, you can't really afford well to host things outside of one of the big clouds that is owned by one of the cool evil companies. And then the thing is with the smaller hosters, you often do run into similar issues where they then work with their local government or things like that. It's difficult. It's a balance. I think it's a good idea to try and get away from these big tech companies to at least some degree, even just because it's nice to not have all of your data in the hand of one company, just also as an insurance, because like people can get locked out of their Google accounts for pretty much no reason. Yeah, and then your life is gone. So I think it's just for that alone a good idea to try and at least diversify the tech companies you're relying on in your day-to-day life.
I've operated my own mail server for the past 30 years.
Yes.
It's getting harder and harder to run your own mail service these days, though.
It is, yes.
Without getting in every spam list, because Google basically controls email at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah.
There is I'm also kind of very resistant to the individual approach because it feels very disempowering, I think, for a lot of people to try and make kind of consumer level choices. Again, like incredibly ingrained structural forces. So understanding kind of at what level the battle needs to be had and the part that you can play in that, I think is far more important than having a kind of putting too much pressure on yourself and your friends to, get rid of your Instagram account or whatever. Yeah, I think kind of large-scale organizing and pressuring also governments and holding corporations to account at that level.
I think social networks has done incalculable damage to societies. It has turned us against each other. It has led to the election of autocrats. It is such a catastrophic event in world history. In fact, maybe to solve the mystery of the Fermat paradox, not Fermat, sorry, the Fermi paradox. It might not be nuclear war. It might be social networks.
Yeah.
Maybe it has to become a new term in the Drake equation. Why can we not hear any aliens? Well, because they invented Facebook on their planet.
How much time do we have left? Okay, so maybe 2 more questions. Yeah, so we've got one right over here.
Hi, thanks for your talks. My question is mainly for Vikram, but I suppose it can be answered more generally too. You talk about, like, there were discussions around worker organizing, around more traditional trade union organizing strategies, or yes, it is possible to shut down a data center. But to my knowledge, many of these data centers that are operated are often majoritarily staffed by like short-term contract workers and so on. And does your vision of worker organizing mainly rely, or maybe another way I would ask it is, do you have strategies that we can include more contract workers and so to participate in these organizing structures, or should we at least for now rely on tech workers in offices organizing and standing in solidarity? Thoughts on something around this?
I can try to say something very quickly. It has to involve everybody, right? I think that's my short answer. I don't think. I don't think there's a specific hierarchy in organizing that way too, right? Like so. Yeah, I don't think that's. Yeah.
I'd like to point out again that that it's most important to win elections. If you don't want Alternative for Deutschland to run Germany, then you have to win elections. Do you want to be outside holding the placards protesting, or do you want to be inside the building writing the laws? You have to win elections. And so protests feel good emotionally, but winning elections protects your country from a horrible outcome. Whatever country you're in, there's lots of European countries that, that there is some danger that extremists could come into power. And so you gotta work at that level, at the policy level.
Yeah, it seems to, in fact, be happening across the board. And we probably need a whole variety, the full spectrum of tactics. Do we have one last question before we go and have an apéro and actually discuss some of those tactics in slightly more private conversations? Any more questions? There's one from online. Great event. Have you entertained the future scenario that the complete merge of big tech, government, and information capitalism has already happened, and that society is just slow to catch up? Well, in short, yes. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing this event. I believe quite a few of us are all too aware of that. For me personally, the idea that it's too late, it doesn't work when you're up against people literally losing their lives. It's never too late to save more lives. Like, it's literally, that's what's happening right now, right? We're in the middle of a genocide. And every single action matters. And we're actually, yes, we're too late for many, but there is an entire future that's still to be won. And I think it's really, really essential that we're fighting for it.
Exactly. Yeah, I have nothing to add.
Yep. We are outside of all these things. right? Let's not become part of this Borg, right? Let's stay outside it and fight the Borg. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody, so much. Thanks for everyone who's come to the event and everybody online, and to our speakers. And again, thanks to Freya and The Alternative for organizing.